The Jewish Channel's Week in Review. For the first time, women's prayer services are allowed at the Western Wall. Fashion designer Elie Tahari, this famous bandmate, embarks on a solo career, and more of the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. Women are free to pray in whatever way they choose in the existing women's section at the Western Wall after a surprising court decision last week. Women's prayer services at the Western Wall in Jerusalem had been generating attention in recent years due to arrests by Israeli police. Police had claimed that these women were violating laws regarding the holy site by wearing prayer shawls, praying out loud as a minyan, and reading aloud from Torah scrolls. But a Jerusalem District Court judge ruled Thursday that these practices are not in violation of the law. The judge, Moshe Sobel, was upholding a ruling made 2 weeks earlier by the Jerusalem Magistrate Court. As we go to broadcast, Israeli police have not announced whether they will appeal the decision. Sobel's ruling concludes women's groups' advocacy for a compromise solution that had been proposed to accommodate both women's prayer groups and Orthodox worshippers at the Western Wall. In recent weeks, government officials and advocates on both sides had embraced a plan proposed by Jewish agency head Natan Sharansky to create a third communal prayer area at the Western Wall specifically for egalitarian prayer, which would have added to the already existing prayer spaces where men's and women's prayer is conducted according to ultra-Orthodox standards. While key women's advocacy groups, including the one most associated with this issue, Women of the Wall, had endorsed Sharansky's plan, they have now declared it, quote, not relevant with the court victory. The ultra-Orthodox rabbi who oversees the Western Wall Plaza, Shmuel Rabinowitz, also withdrew his endorsement of the Sharansky plan for a third prayer area after, quote, ultra-Orthodox and Orthodox communities expressed a decisive stand against any compromise. But the legal battles may not be over. Sobel's ruling could be appealed by the police, or other parties could sue, including the ultra-Orthodox religious organization that oversees the Western Wall, and the case could theoretically end up at the Israeli Supreme Court, which has already considered the issue of women's prayer multiple times. At issue will be the Supreme Court's rulings and what they mean. Specifically, where the Supreme Court had ruled in 2003 on women's prayer services, Sobel's decision says that 2000 decision, quote, is not an order, but rather a recommendation. Meanwhile, beyond Israel's domestic politics, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is seeing some progress on the road toward resolution, with an Arab League proposal that is being embraced to varying degrees by both the Israeli government and the Palestine Liberation Organization. Qatar Prime Minister Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim Al Thani, meeting with Secretary of State John Kerry on Monday, told reporters, quote, the Arab League delegation affirmed that agreement should be based on the two-state solution on the basis of the 4th of June 1967 line, with the possibility of comparable and mutually agreed minor swap of the land. Assuming a peace deal would contain that and a, quote, just solution for Palestinian refugees, the Arab League said it would provide full recognition of the State of Israel. Tzipi Livni, the newly elected Israeli cabinet minister handling the Israeli-Palestinian peace issue, welcomed the Arab League's statement, calling it, quote, very positive news. The PLO's chief negotiator, Saeb Erekat, said that the Arab League statement, quote, presented the official Palestinian position. However, he went on to describe it in specific chronological terms that somewhat differed from the Arab League. Upon Israel's unequivocal acceptance of the two-state solution of the 1967 border, the state of Palestine as a sovereign country might consider minor agreed border modifications equal in size and quality. Radical Palestinian groups, including the PFLP and the DFLP, condemned the Arab League statement. Moving on to two stories of Israeli cultural exports. Designer Elie Tahari was born and raised in Jerusalem and has become well known for innovating in fashion. Meredith Gansman spoke with him.
Bright colors and sleek designs adorn beautiful models at this spring 2013 fashion presentation. But when you strip away the glamour and the flash, you might be surprised to meet the humble designer.
It was a means for me to make a living, really to help others.
The man behind some of women's most popular fashions is Elie Tahari.
Elie Tahari was born in Israel, but from an early age his home was in a transient state, moving back and forth between Israel and Iran until his parents divorced.
When my parents divorced, was no different than my parents were together, really, because when they were together, they were fighting between the two families. My mother had epilepsy. She couldn't take care of us. My father didn't have a job. It was all one big chaos. So getting divorced is another piece of a chaos.
Because of this chaos, Israel Social Services placed Tahari in a Jewish orphanage, where he lived until he transferred to an Israeli Air Force boarding school. But it was his time spent out of the classroom that showed him a world beyond his orphaned upbringing.
I used to sneak out to, from school, go to movie houses.
Yes, Hollywood showed him a promised land.
Beach, bathing suit, bikinis, beautiful women, cars, convertible cars.
Searching for a place to call home, Tahari took a chance. With less than $100 to spare, he hoped a standby ticket on El Al Airlines to New York City would be his final destination. Living in a shelter for runaway boys in the East Village, he worked as an electrician in the garment center, where he got his first glimpse of the fashion industry. In the evening, he sold clothes at a boutique in Greenwich Village. Soon, he opened his own boutique and began building a brand piece by piece. Embracing the hippie and disco culture, his first design was the tube top, a little piece that made a big impact.
When I started with one product at a time. If it was a tube top, the first thing I did, or then we did a blouse, and then we did a dress. But that's all we did, one product. It was important for me always, whatever I do, has to be the best it is.
When I visited his showroom, he changed my jacket to a cardigan and even tweaked the length of my own Elie Tahari dress. What can I say? The man knows how to make women look their best. To see more from the evolution of fashion designer Elie Tahari, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Another Israeli-born cultural figure is musician Oneg Shemesh, formerly a member of the Moshav band and now embarking on a solo career. Christian Needon has that story.
Oneg Shemesh is a musician with a message, a Jewish one, influenced by the music of the late Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach.
Things can't stay this way, I close my eyes and pray. We need a revolution, revolution now.
Which was imparted while Shemesh was growing up on the Moshav, or cooperative village community, founded by Carlebach and his followers in rural Israel. This week, the artistic spirit of Carlebach was recognized with a Drama Desk Award nomination for Eric Anderson, who plays the musical rabbi in the Broadway show Soul Doctor. TJC invited Shemesh to talk about his first-hand take on the musical legacy of the real Carlebach, imparted to him and other young Jews who went on to form the Moshav band.
Growing up, we didn't really have that much entertainment as far as video games and computers, so we had to entertain ourselves, and music was obviously, the thing that we were most attracted to. So we would get together as kids and we would play music and make up songs, and then in '97 we founded the Moshav band.
The songs they wrote often started with a simple strum of the guitar, something that helped Carlebach write hundreds of songs during his lifetime.
Carlebach had his signature strum that he did. It was something like this. And then the song would just come. Da, 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 or whatever it would just flow. But he always had that one strum. Usually it was a D minor, I don't know why, but could have been an E or an E minor or any other chord,
Shemesh said that he and other Jewish bands influenced by the legacy of Carlebach have integrated a variety of other influences to create their own unique sound.
The Middle Eastern elements that we grew up with in Israel, together with the rock elements that we picked up, from our parents and from influences here in the U.S. So we're trying to mesh it all together.
To hear more about Oneg Shemesh and his music, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. Rachel Shukert has a name and face that may be familiar to many TJC viewers. She has a new book out, as Meredith Gansman reports.
Rachel, I love how this book begins. It's like quintessentially you gone old Hollywood. It was one of those nights in Hollywood, the kind that make gossip columnists and newspapers and the announcers on the newsreel say, it was one of those nights in Hollywood. What inspired Starstruck? You seem like you've been writing for old Hollywood forever.
Well, I mean, I think in my head I sort of had. As a kid, I was really obsessed with old movies, like really obsessed with old movies. And
how'd you first get introduced to them?
During the summer, I would walk to the library. It was like walking distance to my house, and you could check out a certain number of books and things, but they also had a video section. You could check out all the movies that you wanted and keep them for 2 weeks.
Were you ever entranced by any of the Jewish stars or the Jewish heritage of old Hollywood?
Well, I did have a book called Great Jews in Film and Television.
I feel like everyone had
that book. And it had a pink cover. It was like a big sort of coffee table book. And I remember going through it and just being extremely excited to find out that someone I liked were Jewish. I mean, I was less excited that like all this sort of like nebbishy character actors were Jewish. I'm like, oh, Martin Balsam's Jewish, awesome, you know. But I remember being like, oh, Lauren Bacall is Jewish, and you know, seeing this sort of like women that were very glamorous but also Jewish, I think was very affirming for me.
So talk to me about the pieces of this book. The main character is Margaret, who is desperately trying to make it out there in Hollywood.
One of the things I wanted to do was to kind of unpack a lot of the kind of mythos about Hollywood at the time. You know, that there's all these like foundational stories that about Hollywood, and Hollywood tells itself, and that we tell ourselves about Hollywood, that you can become an overnight star, that you're discovered at a soda fountain, that famously Lana Turner was supposedly discovered at a soda fountain when she was playing hooky from school, which is a story I lifted directly for how Margaret is ultimately discovered. You know, and then there's the sort of like that whole kind of Judy Garland, like incredibly talented and then destroyed by the studio, which is really reflected in the story of Gabby Preston, who's another character in the book. But so I kind of wanted to take these like big archetypal stories and then kind of like look at them and be like, well, what would it really feel like if that happened? And like, what would it really be like? You know, to kind of take it away from the realm of myth and really flesh them out and make them feel human-sized again.
For more from Rachel Shukert and Starstruck, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally, what regrets would you be left with if you or someone you know passed away tomorrow? The Jewish Federation of Greater Washington's scholar-in-residence, Erica Brown, has been contemplating that and related questions and compiled some answers in a new book, Happier Endings, A Meditation on Life and Death. She recently stopped by TJC Studios for an interview, and here are the highlights. So the title Happier Endings, the ending you're referring to it's the big ending.
It's the big one.
It's the final ending.
It's the ultimate one.
The subtitle is A Meditation on Life and Death, which is not the topic, you know, a lot of people are comfortable approaching it, and you say from the start, actually, that it's always been something that's been extremely uncomfortable for you.
Yeah, I think for most people it's the conversation they're avoiding, but I think that it's a conversation you can't avoid, and you need to find a good way to have it.
What are some of the recommendations that you have for what are the conversations people should be having?
I think there are conversations about one's own burial and arrangements to make, purchasing of plots, writing of the tombstone, your financial wills, your ethical will, which could be a letter or a statement or a document that shares your life wisdoms, the collected life wisdom of your hard-earned experience. It's important to think about regrets and if there's anything you could do to fix them. It's important to think about forgiveness, granting it and accepting it from others, showering people you love with praise, and saying goodbye.
What were the common threads there among many people about what are the kinds of things that if you had to tell people, focus on this now because you will regret X later?
Yeah, I think for most people, they don't realize that when they don't make burial requests and when they don't give away their possessions in some orderly fashion, that family after them is going to fight. And that's very often the case. And for most parents, for example, really want in their lifetime to bring their children together. There's no greater joy than seeing your children loving each other. And yet, if there's arguments about how you're going to be buried or second guessing, there's arguments about the will and the will is contested, then they're families who don't speak to each other anymore, and no one wants that.
You can see the full interview with Erica Brown in the Interviews category on the Jewish Channel On Demand on cable. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 505, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Cable Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and on Comcast in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.